To own a Morgan is to own a passion. This is a car that you really need to love. It's idiosyncratic and it's full of little problems that need constant tinkering so you get the best out of your car. But once you own a Morgan, you become part of a unique motoring membership. And the only qualification to become a member is exposure to and the contracting of an incurable disease called Morganitis.
Morgans were part of the Australian motoring landscape from the beginning, imported by enthusiasts who'd fallen in love with the cars in England. It wasn't until the late 60s that a dealership run by Ken Ward started importing Morgans in larger numbers. Suddenly, there were enough Morgans driving around that they became noticed. The Morgan had come of age in Australia.
It's a nice colour blue, isn't it? It is my late wife chose that, and I didn't know how it looked, but so we go with it, and I'm very proud of it. And I just claimed it one of the nicest, prettiest looking cars in the car club. And it's a shame he didn't live long enough to enjoy it all, but I'm proud of it, and I'll look after it for it. We'll get it to the muster for her sake. A bit more to do on it, a bit of polishing up to do on it. Been standing for 3 years now, been standing, so it's about time we got some light, so some daylight to it. That's a lovely car.
Morgans have been produced at the same factory at Malvern Link, Worcestershire, England for 90 years or so. It's a family company that takes great pride in the craft work that goes into this car. Traditional methods of coach building are still used to build this car. The body is fashioned from oakwood struts and a steel frame chassis. This is a hand-built car, virtually made to order, with great care and pride.
Well, I had this vision of Morgan driving through the country lanes with 2 Dalmatians behind me. So that's why we bought a Morgan. How's
He's
that?
wanted one ever since, you know, he was about this big and first saw one.
I first saw a matchless engined 3-legged Morgan in the UK when I was a sub-teenager. And that was in industrial Bradford, you know, where it's all muck and brass. And I was fascinated by these tappets going on in front of this car. I thought, one of these days, I'm going to get myself a Morgan. So that's why we bought a Morgan. It had been well raced before we got it. And about 10 years later, we went down to Tasmania for a fortnight, didn't we?
About 6 years ago, actually.
Yeah, about 6 years ago.
About 6 years ago.
And when we arrived back again, John Merton, who was a real Morgan person, because he knows everything about Morgans, said, look, we'll have to fix that door of yours. It's a bit loose. And it was a bit loose. You could rack it up and down like this. So we took the door off, and we found that the only thing holding it together was the paint. You know, the door post was not there. There was the hinges were there, and the paint was there, but there's nothing inside it. The wood had all rotted away. And so we started there and worked down the bottom. There was no wood there, and we realised that the car actually was held together purely by being friendly. You know, all the parts were they were used to being together, so that's why they stayed together. And that was about all. And the paint helped together, didn't it, love?
More or
And
less.
Jane said, what was it,
If I'd known it was that bad when we were driving through these little country lanes in Tasmania, you know, visualised when we got back, I could see us just sitting in the 2 seats on the roadway and all the bits folded around.
So when we got all the panels off and looked at the wood, parts were good and parts weren't, so we realised we had to do that. And we got some coach wood rather than the ash, and used the old parts that we still had as a template and made the new parts. For the back wheel arches that we laminated together with araldite, because it's plywood, we had to make a former, and we built, that's John Merton, bent the metal round a barrel to make the shape, and then he welded braces, and then we laminated the plywood to it and held it together with clamps, and that formed the wheel arches. So that's how it started. And when we got the top off, we said, oh, this chassis is looking a bit chatty, we'll have to send it for sandblasting. We sent it for sandblasting, came back, and there were 35 cracks in the chassis. So that had to be welded up, and it went on from there. You know, we had the engine out, so we turned the engine over to look at the bearings, and we found that it was down to the copper. So it was necessary to have the bearings done. So we said, well, where we've got the bearings out, might as well balance the crankshaft and do the pistons. But the most telling part of our relationship, Jane and I, was when it was finished. It was painted in a crimson colour.
Not quite the same colour.
Not quite the same colour.
It was red, yes.
Red.
I looked at it and said I don't like the colour. And it became known not as the Morgan anymore, but as the Black Hole.
Black Hole, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So we realised that what we were doing, we were starting at the wrong end of it. You know, we were starting with the colour of the car and then saying, oh, what colour upholstery would we have? Because it was black before, you see, very hot. So we said, well, what colour is a reasonable colour? And I liked a tan, you know, like pigskin shoes. I like that colour. So we found this colour of the upholstery, and then we realised what an advantage it was, because we could go to blue or maroon, couldn't we? Or green. Or crimson.
Or green.
Because the paint will wear out, or green.
Or green.
The paint will wear out much sooner than the leather.
Yeah.
And we saw a Bentley.
An old Bentley in Canberra, yeah. Rushed over and said, what colour's
That's
your car
the colour.
painting? That's the colour we want.
Yeah, that's right. And it turned out to be a standard Triumph Rover colour.
Woodward green.
No,
Brooklands green. And it was a
green.
racetrack of some description.
Yeah, Brooklands green.
Yeah, Brooklands green.
So we got it done in Brooklands green.
Despite being English, the Morgan car is almost an Australian icon, in the Aussie way of being self-reliant, adaptable, egalitarian. Morgan owners come from all walks of life. Businesses, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, builders, mechanics, boilermakers, they're all united by the mateship this little car imbues. Talk to any of them about their car and they will inevitably be able to tell you its life story. They will also know where every other Morgan in the district is, who owns it now, who used to own it, and its mechanical history. They constantly communicate with each other, swapping not only spare parts but stories. Helping repair each other's cars is almost de rigueur if you're a Morgan owner.
This car is a 1966 Plus 4. It was born as a four-seater. It's now been remodelled in 1991 to have a full Supersports specification body, full aluminium body with the original Lawrence Tune hardtop, which is the only one in Australia. In 1962, Chris Lawrence and Richard Shepherd-Barron drove a car, had developed a car like this for the Morgan factory. And at that time, Morgans were very active in racing, mainly because of Chris Lawrence. And they were often Porsche beaters. And just a heavy competition history for the car. When I bought the car, it was mainly two rally specifications. It was very heavily developed underneath in terms of strength, with a good working engine, but not a proper race engine. And I've developed the engine now with some very good equipment, all steel crankshaft, Carrillo rods, forged alloy pistons, forged alloy flywheel. We've also put these wheels on it, which are fairly unusual, a mini light wheel, and that's for the strength, because the old chrome wire wheels, the 72-spoke wire wheels, tend to break under racing pressures. After some races, you find you have 5 or 6 spokes broken, and it's a bit frightening to think what would happen if more broke, and these are a lot stronger. So just with the level of grip that the tyres get these days, it transfers a lot of pressure through to the wheels. Nothing but the best equipment has gone into it. It is a very potent engine, now in excess of 200 horsepower at the flywheel and about 120 rear wheels. It's quicker than any road-going +8, a lot quicker, and it'll achieve a top speed of in excess of 120 mile an hour.
Morgan are one of the few cars that if you buy them at the right price and keep them for a number of years, you certainly won't lose money, and yes, in actual fact, you can make money.
John Baker lives near Orange in Western New South Wales. Like many other Morgan owners, he doesn't only have one Morgan, he has a garage full.
Morgan owners generally fall into 2 categories. Some younger solicitors and barristers sometimes buy them as an alternative to something like a Porsche, but quickly become disillusioned with them and sell them. The other people are those such as myself who buy them and virtually keep them for their entire life. I bought my first Morgan 36 years ago when a lot of young people at the time, particularly men, were buying sports cars. I decided to buy a Morgan because my father had owned a 3-wheel Morgan many years previously, and they were certainly rated a high-performance sports car. I have 3 Morgans that are mobile at the moment and 1 in pieces. This is a 1952 F4 Morgan. I believe it to be the only 4-seater 3-wheeler Morgan in Australia. Morgans were produced originally in 1910, and until 1952 they actually made 3-wheel Morgans. The reasoning behind that was they were cheaper to produce, the speeds were such that they were not technically inferior, and they were also registered as a motorbike and sidecar with a significant financial gain.
Well, I grew up in a family where I had a father who was always a car fanatic, heavily involved in motorsport. And I had a beloved, a favourite uncle who was 12 or so years older than me. And he had a succession of interesting cars, and one of them was a 37 Series 1 Morgan. And I can remember that as a kid, and I remember it was such an exotic car. I was always very proud when he'd pick me up from school, drive me around when I was 5 or 6 years old. And I think that stayed with me for many years. Morgan owner in that house there. There's a 3-wheeler that he thought for a while was the ex-Johnny O'Keefe car. Johnny O'Keefe had a 1946 matchless MX4 engine 3-wheeler. He lost it, unfortunately, in a bet, I gather. And a short while ago, a friend of mine up here bought a 1946 car and thought it might have been the car in question because it was under a house at Cabramatta. However, he spoke to Barry O'Keefe, John O'Keefe's brother, and found out that it wasn't the car after, and disappointing to everybody because it was the wrong colour, and everybody would like to know what happened to that car, and certainly it is out there somewhere, presumably still in Australia.
Because it's a sports car, the engine bay of the Morgan Plus 4 is pretty compact. But it seems to be taking a long time for Noel and John to get that engine in. At this rate, they could miss the hill climb.
There's something really appealing about driving an open-top car. I mean, not only it's the wind in your hair, but it's the sights and the smells, and of course, the almost animal sound as you, change gears and head into that radical corner. The sports car is a relic from a time past, a time when things were a lot more simpler, when motoring was perhaps considered luxurious, sophisticated, exotic. Nowadays, of course, we drive in cars and we feel closeted in air conditioning with a CD player blaring forth in bumper-to-bumper traffic, trying to avoid road rage. But back then, driving a car like this, well, it was like getting out there amongst it, discovering the world. Other brand names that existed then were Bugatti, Alfa Romeo, Cadillac, Jaguar. But there was one name in amongst these myriad of names that really shone out. And it was a car that was available to everybody. And it was a car that became really part of the motoring culture. And that car was the Morgan. Whoops.
Why don't we have a name for this car? Why haven't we never ever given her a name?
We could call it a Mog.
No, everybody calls it a Mog. We should call it something like Jemima or Clarissa
No.
or Jennifer. Now, what about the car, the show, Two Fat Ladies on their motorbike?
They don't have a name for the motorbike, do they?
No, but we can call this car Clarissa Jennifer after the Two Fat Ladies.
Clarissa Jen.
Clarissa Jen. I dub thee Clarissa Jen. Now, I've been driving it now for about 4 years, and I think I can honestly say I know what it's going to do. It's the joy of driving a car that doesn't have a suspension. And you have to drive the car. It's not just a case of sitting in it and steering it. You don't get that with modern cars. Oh yes, and this is real driving. This is actually getting into a car and working to get where you want to go. But having fun while you're doing it, because you can have the roof down, you feel the sunshine, you get the wind, the chapped skin, sunburn. It's all part of driving a Morgan.
Well, I had a friend who said you have to be eccentric to own a Morgan, and I kind of liked that idea. I never thought anything about it. And then my mum ended up buying this, and I went to visit her one weekend, and she said, now get in it and drive it. And I was barely awake. I had dressing gown, fluffy slippers, the lot. She said, get in it now and drive it. I said, I haven't driven a car for 20 years. She said, get in it and drive it. So I did. I went round the block, and I thought, oh, it's not too bad. I went round the block again. I thought, oh, I like this. She said, well, you can't have it, but you might inherit it. So I kind of liked it from there on, and I liked the smell of the leather. So she ended up giving it to my brother, and then I got it. I inherited it. And I keep thinking, oh, I'll drive it a bit more. No, I get a bit nervous, so I don't drive it. So I got a chauffeur, so I don't have to drive it. I can drive it when I want. So I think I'm eccentric. I think I qualify now to be a Morgan owner. I love them. I give the neighbours a bit of a thrill. I get in it and I go round and round the block, and all these kids wave at you and they smile. See, you just did it then. No matter where you go, someone smiles at you. It doesn't happen in an MG.
This is a really good place to stop. I was ready for this cup of tea.
God, so was I.
Yeah. I didn't realise how hot it was going to be today.
No, I think you're getting a bit sunburned.
Yeah.
Should have worn your hat.
Yeah. Car looks good.
You did a good job on the polishing.
I always do a good job on the polishing.
Yeah. God, I was thirsty. You should do this now.
So glad that we had the car resprayed the same colour, same black. But, you know, it's a better black.
Well, it's not the same black. It's midnight black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't beat a black car for making it look shiny.
No.
Yeah.
Just looks elegant, doesn't it?
Well, so much for black cars. This red one still hasn't got an engine in it. Lots of huffing and puffing going on, but it just won't get in there. Keep pulling that chain, guys. Something will happen.
The Morgan Club has never previously had a national meeting in 43 years, and we decided to do one in 2001 in Bathurst. It was a raging success, and I think that's because of the involvement, the level of involvement of Morgan owners. As far as we know, there are about 400 Morgans in Australia, and we had well over 130 that made the effort to get to Bathurst from all over Australia.
The beautiful town of Bathurst in the central tablelands of New South Wales was the backdrop for the largest gathering of Morgans that has ever happened in Australia. Bathurst is the oldest inland settlement, settled in 1815 after William Cox had completed the considerable feat of building a road over the Blue Mountains. Governor Macquarie traversed this new route, and when he reached the road building party's depot on the west bank of the Macquarie River, he proclaimed it a site for the erection of a town at some future period, which was to be named Bathurst. It was used as the launching pad by many early explorers. Men like Evans, John Oxley, Alan Cunningham and Charles Sturt set off into the interior from the banks of the Macquarie River. As such, it became the centre for expansion into the Western Plains, becoming a major centre for Australia's wool industry. But Bathurst has another great tradition. From 1911, motor racing developed in the area, leading to the establishment of the Mount Panorama Racing Circuit in 1938. To celebrate this motoring history, Victor's Walk outside Bathurst Town Hall honours the legends of Australian motorsports. Drivers like Jack Brabham, Dick Johnson, Peter Brock are commemorated in brass on the footpath. But besides the roaring V8s, Morgan too takes its place, notably in the hill climbs and sprints. The Morgans get to Bathurst in many ways. Most drive up, and for a while, every car in Bathurst seems to be a Morgan. They arrive in a multitude of colours, models and styles. For nearly a day, the cars pour in. There are about 400 Morgans in Australia, and 130 of them are coming to Bathurst, to the muster. The RACQ joined in, providing a Morgan support vehicle. But when you come all the way from Queensland, why not tow a trailer with a special Morgan on board? Some chose to travel by truck, the long journey being a little hard for some of the more vintage and venerable cars.
Should be fine.
I wonder if the boys need a bit of a hand.
Right, now we're in.
Come on, lads, don't drag the chain.
Now we need a little jack on here to jack that up because it's the wrong height. A little one you had will do.
Hello. What's this John's pulling out from underneath?
Underneath the aluminium.
The weekend began with a morning of complete adoration. After a slow burn around the Mount Panorama racetrack, 130 cars paraded through Bathurst city streets. Morgan, in all its different guises, was in the town and on display. The cars finally ended up at Bathurst Historic Town Square, where the adoration really began. The show and shine was a graphic display of the living history of the car, the care and patience that people have for this little car. Here was Morgan, in all its glory. Morgan, the Immaculate Contraption. No two Morgans are alike. Over the years, the various models evolved, and as they changed, different components were introduced. The town square of Bathurst filled with cars and people. Engines turned, tappets whirred, and carburettors pumped away. Polishing rags were everywhere, and the place shone. People came to look, to compare cars, and of course, to tell the stories of their beloved motor cars.
Why am I a Morgan owner? Because they're a wonderful car. I started with mine in '63 for circuit racing. You know, I was trying it in a Volkswagen of all things, and it's a bit slow. So a friend said to me, what do you need? Something faster. And so he said, this is a car for you. And I said, what is it? And he said, a Morgan. I said, what's that? And he said, oh, it's like an MG, only better.
The coachwork was still the same, but quite often a three-wheeler would have a completely different engine, ranging from Anzani, Matchless or the Jap.
When I was 16, I came to the Bathurst car races and I saw a British Racing Green Morgan. And I said that I was going to have one of those one of these days. And it took me a while, but I got it. Oh, well, when I left school, and you have to have an aim in life, and one of my aims was to own a Morgan. And every time I saved up enough money to buy a little part of a Morgan, I would pin a little bit more of a Morgan photo up on the wall. And that's a fairly classic way of saving money. Know what you're going to go for and go for it. And I think that's probably what Morgan owners are, people who just go for it.
Four-wheelers, too, were sourced from many different backgrounds. Engines came from Ford, Vanguard, Triumph, Rover, and most recently, BMW.
Aren't they lovely? Aren't they beautiful? And one of the distinct advantages of tending such a big rally as the Morgan Muster here in Bathurst is there is such a feel of expertise amongst these guys that have had these cars 30, 40 years. For instance, this very rare Jap engine has a series of numbers down here, KTC. And J.A. Presswick, which is the Jap, had a unique system of identifying his numbers through the word, he used to use the word pneumatic, which had 10 letters. So the C in here from the word pneumatic is 8. So it's a 1928. The K equals 1,000. The T is a twin. So therefore it's a 1928 twin 1000 engine. The particular car has a very interesting history. It's a 1928 Super Aero. It was in Singapore during the war. It was actually buried to keep it out of the hands of the Japanese. In 1946 it was exhumed and came to Australia with an Englishman by the name of De Soto Phillips. It was quite a well-known Morgan racer in the 30s. The vehicle was restored in 1990 and Robert Holmes Accord had it in his museum for quite a few years. We bought the car from a farmer that bought it from Janet Holmes Accord after Robert died. We basically bought it for the Muster because we were very keen to have a three-wheeler down here, and we are thoroughly enjoying the car. It's backfired a little bit on me buying a car that's in a museum. It's taken a little bit of work to keep it going and getting it going properly, but we've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we got a four-seater because we wanted a family sports car, and so it had to be a Morgan. And it was great, and the kids just loved it.
Lots of memories of going for drives in the back of this with the two of us and our brother as well squeezed in. Our little hats flying off all the time. The dog. We used to put our big dog in the back here. We had a big old Newfoundland. He used to sit in the back on trips with goggles, was it? Yeah, with a pair of goggles on to look after his eyes. Yeah, he used to love it with the wind running through all his hair.
The show and shine is an interesting affair. It's a bit of you show me yours and I'll show you mine. A bit of a look at what you've got and oh, look at that. Mostly it's a lot of just looking at cars and listening to the beautiful variations in sound that emit from their engines.
Righto, flaps. Neutral. Go. Alright, decompress. You can understand why they weren't in a hurry in the old days. They couldn't get them going. Bloody RACQ. Wouldn't happen if NRMA were doing it.
Too young to start these things.
The major trip we did, my son and I, we went on a part of a round Australia trip we only had 3 weeks. In short, we did 10,000 Ks. We didn't drive at night time because of the cattle on the road. And one hit with even a kangaroo or a wombat would put us out of action. So we had to be very, very careful there. The fuel pump worked loose and leaked some oil, which I just tightened the pump up again. I did wear 2 front tyres out, and that's all the problems we had on the whole trip, and we had a ball, and so did the son.
RACQ to the rescue.
To the rescue. Wouldn't be without it. Even it's nice in the truck. Even the temperature gauge on the engine is going down. When it's doing that, I know it's getting. The majority of Morgan owners are keepers. They keep their cars for, it doesn't matter how many years. Very few just buy and keep for a while and resell. They normally just hang on to them. I refer to it as a disease that you can't get rid of.
I first saw a Morgan when I was 16 in Auburn, and I fell in love with the things. Then I started to go to Warwick Farm Race Course to see Ken Ward making a fool of himself in one of these. And 43 years later, I managed to get one. I'm a pretty determined guy, so I've got a sign on the car that says determination achieves, and another one that says why be normal, drive a Morgan. And the number plate is DA 1659, David's ambition from 16 to 59, and I finally got the bloody thing.
We came over from Western Australia, and naturally to come over we decided to truck it over, which involved just waiting a couple of hours to have it loaded, and it was over here in 5 days. And I don't really think we knew a great deal about Morgans, but we just thought they were a beautiful car and we understood the history behind them. We haven't done a lot of mileage in it. We've done a couple of British car runs in it. But I must admit, a lot of the time it does sit in the garage. But I think after this muster, I think it might be coming out a lot more.
Morgan owners are passionate about rallying. There's nothing more enjoyable for them than to get out into the fresh air with a few friends and just drive.
Well, I was quite surprised. I wasn't foreseeing I thought they were MGs. And when you pulled up in the corner and I inquired, I was quite surprised. They're so well made, you know. They're not like our modern cars. No. Our modern cars are only sardine cans. These got a chassis under them.
I've got a bit of a nick out of the top one.
Let's check on Noel and John. Very intense, very concentrated. Just a little bit lower. Come on, lads, you can do it. That's it. Yeah, maybe a bit of rock and roll. Almost there. A bit of hand power. Ah, wait a minute. Maybe this will help. Almost there. Well done, lads.
Congratulations, Jordan. It's in.
One of the things that Morgan owners really love to do is to climb hills. And no, I'm not talking about mountain climbing. I'm talking about the challenge of racing your car against the clock up a very steep hill. Bathurst has such a location. And on the Sunday of the muster, the really die-hard members of the Morgan Club were up early. prepping their cars, changing tyres, taping lights, getting ready for the hill climb.
32's already taken. 31? You have 31.
What's easiest to change 32 in?
Please. You're only going in the hill climb, you're not going in Motorcana. No. You've already been scrutinised. Your cases numbers from you. Something.
Thanks very much.
That's right, you're right. You've got your right number?
Yep.
I'm going to try and get these guys down so that they can go going through the bloody yeah.
As this is a serious racing event, forms were filled and the cars were scrutinised by CAM certified members of the Morgan Club. Everything has to be checked as the danger of bits falling off cars is quite real. Accidents do happen and these cars have to come up to strict racing specification. Even the fire extinguishers must be in perfect working order. Hey, you got the engine in?
Well, most of it, yeah. Except the bits that are hanging out we can't stuff in. And it stayed in for about a day so far. So.
We should do.
This is the man who screwed all the big ends on, so if it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind doing it for the phone.
This green sticker means they're ready to go.
Yeah, the brakes are fine.
Was the fire extinguisher out of date?
No, she's hanging on alright, it is.
It was a good thing to drive on a wet day.
Yeah, 01.
Just a bit of case.
Mate, these cars are very reliable and I have every confidence that none of them are going to stop.
I was keen to enter the hill climb because one of the virtues of this car is that it goes up hills really, really well. It's got such poor brakes, but it really goes like a bullet uphill. It's only got 2 gears and lots of torque, lots of power, and normally it goes very well. I was suspicious of the success we'd have today from when we arrived in Bathurst on Friday. Throughout its life, I've owned it 30 years, and I've lugged it up and down the country and quite often never even got it to start before I pack it up and take it home again. So I think it needs to be retired like me, and we'll settle back to having another shiny car that's less demanding.
There are some very fast cars on the circuit. Sit back, feel the adrenaline as Albie, the fastest Morgan of the day, goes through the bends.